Hello, role-playing people, and in this episode we're going to talk about what happens after the fallen comes into human flesh. How do they regain their memories, and how do those mix with the memories of the human host? To answer these questions, I will make use of the trusty Player's Guide for Demon the Fallen, which is a very good book, and I strongly recommend it. First of all, I think it's worth mentioning the Fallen can possess both someone who is alive, albeit barely, or someone who is recently deceased. In the second case, the demon probably won't have to battle anyone for the vessel, since the soul is gone but the memories somehow remain. In the first case, however, whether we're talking about a ritual, assisted possession, or simply a host whose soul is still around and very weakened, the two spirits will engage in a form of struggle, and the Player's Guide gives us three options, though everyone is encouraged to get creative. First option is, the Fallen enslaves the human's soul, which manifests occasionally as a voice or a presence in the character's head, though it is overpowered by the demon's will and personality. The second option is the human is still powerful enough that the demon manifests as a presence or a voice in the back of his head, slowly eroding his resolve, striving to ultimately take control, which leads up to the third option when the soul is being driven out and the demon becomes 100% dominant, but the human memories are wiped clean in this case, which might cause the Fallen's torment to increase enormously. If the demon is slightly dominant, can the human half regain control and power? If the human is slightly dominant, can it reconcile and work with the Fallen in a form of symbiosis? If the demon is 100% dominant, what will save them from regaining their full torment and going completely mad? Well, these are questions everyone is encouraged to answer throughout the course of their own preludes or chronicles. The book makes it perfectly clear that any combination is right as long as it's willed and it tells an interesting story. But dominance and memory are two different things. The Fallen can be dominant, but that doesn't mean it has access to all of its memories. So secondly, let's look at how memories work. Immediately after the possession, the mortal might not feel any different unless the Fallen heals and repairs some visible or painful chronic condition of the host's body. If the host was in emotional or physical pain before the possession, they might feel better after the fact, enjoying and seeing the world around them in ways unseen till now. If the host was dead or dying, they can definitely attribute the following confusion to the shock of their brush with death. And confusion certainly follows, as the Fallen's memories are submerged, shall we say, into the waters of the host's memories, diluted to the point that some demons don't even remember their celestial names. Their predominant memories are those of the host, though they can feel something is different. They experience moments of intense confusion as they recall events that seem very, very real, but still too fantastic to be true, like the accountant who remembers they once had wings of impossible geometry and calculated and decided upon the celestial body's orbits, or the ER doctor who loses a patient and suddenly remembers they built an entire second realm for their beloved mortals, a realm that went unchecked for millennia. These scenes that play out inside the character's mind feel too real to be dreams, but too weird to make sense. This is called the distortion phase, the phase in which the character experiences distortion in both memory and temporal perception. They often start questioning their sanity as they begin not remembering the abyss, but feeling the pain, having emotional responses to that trauma, which leads to seemingly random bursts of shame, anger, or intense sadness. Luckily, this phase lasts between a few days and a week. What follows is the dissociation phase. At this point, the character is far from aware of their true nature, that they are a fallen architect of reality, but the fact that they are not exactly human is slowly becoming a certainty. Mortal things stop being much fun as the character instinctively or involuntarily manifests the more supernatural elements of their being, using faith, understanding Enochian if it's spoken to them. Imagine that, like suddenly understanding a language you've never heard before. Using lores, assuming their apocalyptic form, and inducing revelation into mortals. At this phase, emotion either drains out of the character as they become cold and remorseless, or they experience intense and maybe outrageous mood swings for the duration of this stage, which can last between a week and a year. Then we go into the reconstruction phase. It is here that the symbiote, shall we say, takes their first steps towards accepting themselves as being one of the fallen. They might remember their true name and celestial name, their duty in the grand scheme of things, and key mortals in their design and contribution to history before the imprisonment. The human memories are still in the foreground, though. They are the wall protecting against the tide of torment, but as the character begins to understand that there are memories they are not remembering yet, they start looking for that information, trying to piece things together. This can come as a burst of remembrance, or it can be a process that lasts for years. This brings us to the last phase, rebirth, which happens when the character emerges from their cocoon of identity and memories and becomes aware of what they were and what they have become. This is the highest point of remembrance that is available to a starting character, so this doesn't mean they remember everything. It means that the two halves that compromise memory are in balance. Confusion is gone, the character knows very well what they are, a fallen angel, and the fact that they are wearing this mortal's flesh and mind like protective clothing or a costume that they can't take off. Now, the legacy background also comes into play, but it doesn't have to modify these phases I've already described unless you want that as a player or storyteller. And instead it can just mean that a character who has achieved rebirth remembers more than others, more details, events, names, and so on. Regardless of how much legacy background a character has, all fallen who are not driven insane by the experience of coming into human flesh will eventually accept their situation and know very well what they are and what they can do, though some can just pretend to be simple mortals. The player's guide also does a fairly detailed explanation of legacy, which I won't go into because it's not essential, really. Mechanically, a successful intelligence and legacy roll, variable difficulty, can yield additional information regarding a location, a name, the use of a lore or ritual, or so on. Now, I'll take you away from the player's guide really quick and present my own approach to legacy possession and memory. Personally, when I run Demon, the more legacy a character has, the quicker their fallen side dominates the mortal side. Thus, they can also initiate the other protagonists on their journey to rebirth, or, if they are at all inclined to do so, to take advantage of their confusion. I do let legacy affect the phases following possession, as some characters have either stronger spirit, smarter host, or both. And I do this in collaboration with the player and their desires and ideas for the character. I am inclined to say the host's mental capacity does matter, since that intelligence effectively has to make room for another whole set of memories which are far older and greater. We're talking millennia of events, processes, and ultimately trauma, right? The agony of the pit. Looking back at the things presented in this episode, it's pretty clear to me that the central challenge in making a Demon the Fallen character is precisely the fact that you have to make two characters, a demon and a mortal, preferably writing up all of their memories and history. And then based on your background rating and your personal preferences for how the story begins, working with your storyteller and deciding what the character forgets, what they remember, how the two sets of memories mix, and how to slowly reveal to everyone at the table key moments but also details in your character's celestial history. There is plenty of room for nuance here, which is why I believe the fact that there is no clear recipe for possession and what happens after, only broad strokes, it's a design choice, not a flaw. What I like is that Legacy doesn't really break the game. It's not the kind of background you want more of because it's so good, but instead it just comes down to preference and the player's starting narrative choices. And again, I will have to point out the fact that Demon the Fallen is effectively a test of collaboration between player and storyteller. You cannot let your storyteller write your character's history for you. You can give them a frame of reference and let them fill in the details if they so desire, but memories are something personal, very personal, and they can make or break a player's connection to their character. If I told my storyteller that my devil was, let's say, the flame and warmth of camaraderie, right, and they kept their mortals warm through the seemingly never-ending winters of the Celestial War, I'm totally going to feel sad but very much immersed if they present me with a tragic memory of mortals who died because of cold, right? Mortals I wasn't able to protect, or maybe mortals that I abandoned. So the GM can't make up the backstory, but they can throw details over what the player gives them, right? And because of this, Demon the Fallen is heavily centered on its protagonists, which is this approach requires a bit of work and effort, but it can be very, very rewarding for the players. Now, can you skip describing this whole process? Definitely. You can skip going over distortion, dissociation, and so on. If the players are already experienced, if they've already had that sort of prelude introductory scenario, yeah, you can just downtime to a point where the character already knows who they are and the player can, comfortably go about the character's business. Don't think in terms of builds. Think characters, stories, and experiences you would like to have and share. And this game will definitely reward that approach. Thank you very much for listening. Take care, have fun, and don't forget to play.